Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show, Week 16 Rankings Edition. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great, and it's a great day to win those semifinals matchups. And we got the man joining me just to do it, Dwain "The Rock" McFarland. Mr. Dwain, let's win some freaking playoff games, man.
Let's win some playoff games, Ian. That's what we're here to do. You know, that's our only goal, like really on the planet, is to help you guys win fantasy championships. Sometimes we do a better job at it than others, but we're ready to roll today. We got the heat today, Ian.
As always, football, family, faith, in that order here on the Fantasy Life Show. Just kidding, kind of. But seriously, let's try to win some fantasy games. You guys know what I'm saying. So with that, let's get into it with our DraftKings opening lines. We're going to be going position by position rankings, and as we get into those, we will be going through the injuries. So I want to start things off today with a look at the weather, because if you guys are hanging out with us live, first of all, thank you. Appreciate it. Hit that like button if you don't mind. Second of all, though, we obviously have the biggest weather game of the week, Dwain, happening here on Thursday night. Of course, we got the Rams taking on the Seahawks. Going to be a complete tsunami monsoon. I'm worried about the safety of everyone there. Just kidding. But all right, so we do have some wins from Kevin Roth over at Roto Grinders. Apparently, though, they're going to be mostly impacting before the game, maybe a little bit more in the first half. His just, again, overall recommendation is that he's more worried about the kickers than anyone overly involved. Rain also not looking like a big time problem. So just a lot going on here, Dwayne. We don't love super windy games, but on the other side of things, it's JSN. It's Puka Nacua. Like, okay, Colby Parkinson, tiebreaker. If you have like a Harold Finn or something like that, I get it. But otherwise, I think the only meaningful downgrade is arguably the quarterbacks. But even then, I'm more so concerned about like Matthew Stafford with Devontae Adams being out, less so because of the wind.
Yeah, this is just a classic spot where we have too many studs, Ian, and it is what it is. Like it could end up being an issue in the game, but it doesn't matter if it is or not. You're not benching any of the guys you just talked about. You're not benching Puka. You're not benching JSN. I mean, yes, the fringe guys. The other name that I have had a lot of questions about this week, you probably have too, Ian, is Rashid Shaheed. So like a player like that, fine, like just use this as the tiebreaker, move on from them. And then maybe with your kicker, but even at kicker, it's hard, man, Ian, because Myers has been one of the best kickers in the NFL. So I did get I got a text from a buddy about Myers, and that he actually asked me about two players, and I was on Myers. I was like, look, man, if you got another kicker you like, fine, like make the swap. But even on that, like I've got teams right now where Myers is still in as my kicker, and there's just not anything on the waiver wire because, yeah, you may be down to 4 teams left in your league, but it's not like everybody else went and cut their kicker, right? We don't really have a lot of other great options. So I'm with you. I'm pretty much sticking with it. I think the two are Parkinson, and the one other I would say is Shaheed. Hopefully you are already not having to deal with either of the Seattle running backs because obviously that sucked for us all year.
And again, the win's obviously important. We've talked about that, but one of the points that Kevin Roth did bring up is the fact that they're kind of working with one of those half roofs in Seattle where they're actually kind of covering the fans from the conditions. So because of that, yes, there might be 30-mile-per-hour wind gusts outside the stadium, but who's to say the wind's actually going to be that much more severe over at the field level? So we'll see what happens. I would advise you guys to continue to follow Kevin Roth over there on Twitter, see if any last-second updates come. But for right now, to Dwayne's point, yes, more so a tiebreaker for Parkinson and obviously Rashid Shaheed, as opposed to benching any of these studs who have helped get us there in the first place. Otherwise, Dwayne, I think the only other game that deserves somewhat of a discussion here is Bills versus Browns. It's going to be obviously very cold temperatures there in Cleveland. Also 15-mile-per-hour sustained winds. That said, Khalil Shakur is basically the only wide receiver on either side we can trust. And him, just like Harold Fanning for the Browns, they work in kind of more of a low ADOT capacity. So I'm also not really worried about the weather there.
Yeah, hopefully you're not starting any of the passing options for the Browns unless it's Harold Fannin Jr., which is a low ADOT player. And hopefully you're not starting any of them for the Bills, even Khalil Shakir. But if you had to trust one of those guys, he's the guy. And to your point, he's a low ADOT player as well. Got some questions around Dalton Kincaid this week. Guys, the Dawson Knox thing, like it's not like his role changed. He's just kind of had a hot 2 games. So wouldn't really want to be dealing with either one of those tight ends either if I can avoid it. But if I had to use one of them, also similar. Kincaid has gotten a little more work down the field this year, Ian, but it wouldn't worry me too much. If he's a guy I've been having to start, I would just still be starting him. He's playing with Josh Allen. Like I would just let that be my trump card. He's playing with Josh Allen, man. I'm just not going to worry too much about it. Like I would need like 25-mile-per-hour winds to really get worried about Josh Allen.
Kincaid actually low-key has not been practicing at all this week here through Thursday. How high in the ranks would Dawson Knox actually go, Dwain, for you if Kincaid is out of the picture? I don't think he enters like must-start top 5, top 6 territory, but it is a situation where Kincaid right now kind of tight end 12, tight end 15 range. We might just kind of cross his name out and put Dawson Knox there. He's been playing great recently.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And the big thing is, like, the Bills just don't have any receivers stepping up. Like, and none of them are playing full-time roles. Like, we hoped that would be a Keon Coleman this year, but it hasn't been. They have other guys that are dealing with injuries as well. And to your point, like, he's just been going to the tight ends lately. Early in the year, it was Dawson. It was Kincaid. Now it's Dawson Knox, and he has scored fantasy points the last 2 games. So yeah, we don't suddenly think his whole talent profile has changed or anything, but we've talked about it. These guys can get on heaters. Josh Allen is going to throw some touchdown passes. So why not to Dawson Knox? I would say, I'm just looking at my tight end ranks right now, Ian. If we heard that Kincaid was out, and you tell me where you feel like, I mean, Dawson Knox would probably move into borderline tight end 1 territory, but he'd be in a group of guys. It's not like, I don't think any of them would be slam dunks. I'm actually looking at the projections right now, PPR. So I've got Parkinson, Schultz, Gadsden. Those are 11, 12, and 13 in the projections. And then you've got Hunter Henry and you've got Tyler Warren. Like, he's probably in that group of guys, but it's really hard to tell you like which one is going to score the most fantasy points. But we might be able to squeeze Knox into the top 12. I think he goes into that tier though.
I think I would start definitely Parkinson, Loveland, Goddard, Schultz, Gadsden, Waller, Warren. That's where I think I'd probably slot in Knox.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Like, it's gonna be somewhere in that range. It's a tier of players.
Otherwise, guys, we do have some cold weather games going on, but none that actually are involving high winds or precipitation. So make sure you continue to check this out throughout the weekend because it is only Thursday after all, but cautiously optimistic. We don't see Mother Nature being too big of an issue here as we get into Week 16. So with that, guys, let's get into our Week 16 ranks. This has been our DraftKings opening lines. But first, a quick word to our friends at DraftKings. I teamed up with DraftKings Sportsbook to bring you the best way to get in on the action this NBA season. Right now, new customers who bet just $5 will get $200 in bonus bets if your bet wins. That's right, new customers bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using the promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. And hey, use your bonus bets on same-game parlays, player props, money line spreads, and more, or stay in on the action with live betting that brings every play to life. So here's your play. New customers turn $5 into $200 if your bet wins, paid out in bonus bets. The crown is yours. Thanks to DraftKings Sportsbook for sponsoring this. Make this NBA season one to remember. Note that minimum minus 500 odds are required. We got the Fantasy Live consensus top 12 running backs on the screen. Right meow leading off with Jahmyr Gibbs, Mr. RB1, Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, Devon Etienne, James Cook. And yes, despite being questionable, Josh Jacobs sitting pretty as our RB6. For what it's worth, we are expecting Josh Jacobs to play. Ian Rappaport did say this morning that he is expected to play, just will not be at 100%. But honestly, that has been the case for most of the season. Moving on, RB7 through 12, Travis Etienne, Saquon Barkley, Chase Brown, Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor, and our one true King Henry rounding out the RB1 ranks. As we transition to the RB2 tier of things, Dravion Henderson sitting pretty as our RB13, followed by Kyren Williams, Devontae Williams, RJ Harvey, DeAndre Swift, and Woody Marks, although he has not managed to practice yet this week. Keep an eye on that, as well as Nick Chubb, because as much as we would like to see Jahar Jordan potentially become a thing, Nick Chubb was out of the picture last week, and he has at least been limited this week. Quinshon Judkins, RB19, followed by Tyrone Tracy, Breece Hall, Rico Dowdle, Kenneth Gainwell, and Omarion Hampton. Dwayne, it does seem like right around that, I would say because of the matchups, Quinshon Judkins, Tyrone Tracy, probably the last 2 guys I'm feeling extra confident about.
Yeah, I mean, I think the guys below them are fairly close. Like Breece Hall's right there as well. Like Breece Hall actually projects better than Tyrone Tracy, but obviously it's a really bad offense, and we've seen Breece in this role have some real duds. So I understand like the concern there. Dowdle's the most interesting one though for me, Ian, just because like coming out of the bye, they did shift more of the workload back over to him versus what we saw the week before the bye. So if Dowdle was really not quite in that dominant role that we saw earlier in the year, but like just a step down from that, like I would feel better about Dowdle, honestly, all the way up to Judkins. The problem is we don't know for sure. So I think that's why I think drawing the line where you're drawing it is good. For me personally, I would draw it after Judkins just as far as level of confidence in the workload. right? Because Tyrone Tracy, we've got a 4-game sample with Kafka, and it's kind of been all over the place. Like, he's led the backfield twice. It's been more of a true split. The other 2 games, I know the most recent data point was really encouraging, but when we're trying to do it from a projection standpoint, usually like with a sample like that, I just use all 4 games to decide how to dice up the utilization. So that's why you saw Tracy's projection guys on the screen was a little bit lower than where we have him ranked. It was just due to some uncertainty. So I would say the line for being confident about their role is after Judkins.
Well said, my friend. You guys will notice that Ashton Jeanty was not in that top 24. We'll talk about him a bit more in a little bit. Want to get through some injuries first, though. Guys who are practicing in full and expecting to play. Saquon Barkley had that stinger scare, but he is off the injury report and good to go. RJ Harvey, Chris Rodriguez also practicing in full and good to go for their respective matchups. More limited, but we'll see. Still feeling good about them. Javonte Williams dealing with the neck issue. Kind of had the shoulder injury to start off last week. Came back in and played, and he was limited. So, again, not necessarily expecting him to be out. Malik Davis, though, guys, is still available in plenty of leagues. Not the worst handcuff to have if you happen to have a spare bench spot. And also note DeAndre Swift officially questionable with a groin injury. However, this has been relatively commonplace throughout the last, 6-7 weeks. He did miss the 1 game against the Bengals. Not saying it's impossible, but again, we are tentatively expecting Swift to play. Would be obviously a very nice boost for Calvin Guy if that is not the case. Guys who are not practicing, Josh Jacobs, but again, just mentioned Rapture saying he's expecting to play. Woody Marks, though, Dwain, is the interesting one. It sounded like after the game, DeMeco Ryans actually said he thought he could have returned, but when you post back-to-back DMPs, I'm not feeling as good about that. So obviously, Jahar Jordan was the big name on waiver wires, but dude, if Nick Chubb is healthy enough to play this week, I think he's going to be the starting running back. How about you?
Yeah, and I just think it's really hard to project it any other way I think the most bold you can honestly get on it is giving them like a split, and you're still going to have Dare Ogunbowale probably rotating in on passing downs. So Ogunbowale might get 25% of the snaps still in that scenario, and then the rest being split between Chubb and Jahar Jordan. They could go with a hot hand depending on how the game starts, but we would really have to have some sort of breaking news that just says that no, Jahar Jordan, based on last week, is going to be the starter for the Texans. And even when we get those little pearls like that, Ian, so many times they don't come through. So it's really a scenario where you would need Nick Chubb to also be inactive to feel confident about pushing Jordan up. And if that was the case, he would be a low-end running back too, if we heard that Nick Chubb and Woody Marks were out. But without that, I think they're both running back 3s. And one of them probably finishes more like a running back 4. One of them is more of a fringe running back 3. So really hard to trust anyone from that backfield, which we already don't like the offensive line. There's just too many issues with the Texans to get really, really bullish on either one of the players.
I was about to say, if I was in a situation where you have Woody Marks, maybe you have Nick Chubb, and you're just kind of wondering what to do, I probably would play a Blake Corum at this point because it just doesn't seem like it's going to be all that clear, particularly if Marks continues to trend towards being out. Also notes for the Saints, Devin Neal out with the hamstring and put on IR, so his season is officially over. Alvin Kamara continuing not to practice as well. So Dwayne, Audric Estime is looking like the potential leader, but we'll see what happens. Obviously, we've also had Evan Hall being someone involved as well. So you have them ranked 43rd and 44th in your ranks. I have them ranked 37th and 38th in mine. So again, not saying someone couldn't emerge. It's obviously a great matchup with the Jets, but I think that's kind of our way of saying we don't really know, and because of that, I would not be trusting either running back if you can help it.
Yeah, I would rather not. I would say theoretically, either one of them could come out of the game with a 70% snap share. The problem is we really don't know which one it's going to be. Last week, after we saw Neal leave the game, it was actually Evan Hull getting more of the work than Estime. So it's funny, I put out a start-sit question for Talk Data to me tomorrow. No one ever mentioned Evan Hull. Estime was mentioned 10 times. So I think you think the same way as I do. I think it's really close between these two guys. So I'll say this, if you needed the upside of a play and you were trying to decide, between the Saints running backs and a Kareem Hunt, I would say theoretically, you're more likely to walk out with one of these Saints guys, dominating the backfield. But you have to realize you could be taking a 2-point outing. So if you're needing floor, these are two players to stay away from. If you're just fine going with a coin flip because you need the points and you're just basically saying, I need to get lucky and hope I guess right on the starter for the Saints and they get a big workload, I think it's fine if you need to use them in that scenario. But we've got them ranked lowly just due to lack of confidence, man, and being able to know who's going to be the guy.
Only other RB injury notes, Dylan Sampson still not practicing with that hand injury. Good news there for Quinshon Judkins. And Bayshall Tootin out for the foreseeable future after breaking his finger. So based on that, Dwayne, let's get into our riser of the week. And it is going to be sticking in that Jacksonville backfield with one Travis Etienne coming off back-to-back top 5 finishes, facing a Broncos defense that has been tough against the run, the pass, pretty much everything this season. But without Tootin, we are looking at a consensus top 10 running back here in Mr. Etienne.
Yeah, and Etienne got this spot last week as the main call out in the rankings risers, but he gets it again for good reason, because now we know we're not going to have Tootin with the finger injury. In these last 2 games where we've had less of a role for Tootin, one game was due to fumbles, the next game was due to an injury. We've had 21.2 and 31.5 fantasy points from Etienne. So yes, feeling really good about it. And really Etienne, like, we can zoom out to a larger sample, Ian, since the Jaguars bye in week 8, and they kind of shift to this more run heavy offense. Now been a little more leaning to the pass the last couple of game. So it was sitting at like a minus 5% drop back rate over expected. Now it's just slightly under at minus 1%. But since that switch after the bye and the way that they've really kind of rethought the offense, 18.3 fantasy points per game for Etienne. So, and most of those have been with Tootin. So I don't think there's really any other way to look at it than, okay, we're not going to have him. We know LaQuint Allen's still going to do some work on pass downs. You talked about what a good job he does in pass pro, and he is. I went and found the video that you were talking about, or some of the threads about the guy just picking up some of these blitzes. And I see why LaQuint Allen gets to get on the field on passing downs. Yeah. But yeah, a really nice ceiling this week for Etienne, 23.6 Xfinity best ceiling. Now, guys, that's the reasonable ceiling. Basically, think of it like 75th percentile kind of range. If you want to talk about outlier ceiling, it's higher than that, even though you're facing the Broncos. Broncos, really good defense, but they're a beatable matchup on the ground, Ian. They're like slightly above average as far as like how challenging they are against running backs, but not one of these outlier matchups where like, oh my God, like we can't start players against them. So Etienne, my running back 8, like you said, I think he's a lock as a top 10 play this week.
And hey, if Trevor Lawrence keeps playing as well as he had over the last 3-4 weeks, man, we could see him continue to elevate that entire offense. So did want to go through a handful of other running backs before we get into Sicko starting Hartitz heater. Starting off with Dwayne, Mr. Travion Henderson, your RB13, my RB11 in the ranks. Yes, Ramondre Stevenson is back. And yes, he is annoyingly involved, particularly in 2-minute and long down distance situations, which again is a surprise given what we knew about Travion coming out of the Ohio State University. But man, it would be a lot cooler if we had 25 touches for Travion. But as we found out, only needs one to really go ahead and make his bank anyway.
Yeah, especially one where Drake London takes out 2 of the defenders, just taking off down the sideline and eliminating those angles. You love to see that from your quarterback. But I think the bottom line with Henderson is we're dealing with a home run hitter, Ian, that plays in a good offense. It's going to see 15 to 18 opportunities. That's still really good for a player that's playing as good as Travion Henderson. So he could certainly dud. The workload could become an issue if for some reason, he gets shut down. He doesn't hit the big, run, doesn't get a touchdown carry. Like, it could definitely hurt him. We saw that the 2 weeks before where he was closer to 12 fantasy points, but do you really want to have Travion sitting on your bench when he throws up the 31? Like, there's just really not a way. And I don't think people are questioning it much. Again, like I put out a tweet earlier asking about biggest start to sit decisions for the week. No one even mentioned Travion Henderson. So I think it's pretty much consensus. They're like, there's no way we can have this guy on our bench. And I agree with the public.
Someone who certainly is going to be in a bit more of those start-sit questions is Rico Dowdle in a tough matchup against Vita Vea and the Buccaneers. That said, Dwayne, Bijan Robinson posted the RB1 overall performance last week, and even Devin Neal had a top 15 finish the week before. So again, it kind of comes down to what we feel like the Dowdle-Chuba split's going to look like. But even in that pre-bye game, Dowdle ended up with 17 touches. So I feel like worst case is going to be more like 15 each. Best case, kind of what you were hinting at earlier, though, is a complete workhorse role, which we've seen what Rico can do with that before.
Yeah, and in the last game that we saw, 64% attempt share, 59% of the snaps. They split the passing workload like basically even. They each had half the 2-minute offense. They each split the route participation rate, and they each had a 5% target share. So that hurts a little bit because Dowdle was definitely doing some damage in the passing game earlier in the season. But to your point, like, we're on a team that we know loves to run the ball. They're really trying to get into the playoffs. Their best path to doing that, I think we've also seen, is that they want to run the ball. They're another one of these teams that since their bye week, they've been leaning more heavily into the run. So I really do like Dowdle. I think he's a low end running back 2 to potentially, I have him ranked closer to mid-range running back 2, but I also understand where our consensus ranks are as a low end running back too, but I think he's in more starting lineups than not this week. I did get some questions on him, but 21.6 point Xfinity best ceiling in PPR scoring. We've got him projected for 13.3 points. I feel pretty good about Dowdle this week as a running back too. And to your point about the Bucs, like they were a lot better run defense early in the year. They haven't been as good lately. And teams, I think, are figuring out, like, just don't run towards Vita Vea, man. Like, double him and then just get away from that guy. Don't go any, doesn't matter if he's doubled. Don't go anywhere close to him. And we have seen some teams figure that out a little bit.
He's a pretty big man. Shouldn't be that hard to identify a pre-snap Dwain, or at least you would think that would be the case. Someone that definitely has a better on-paper matchup here would be Tyrone Tracy. Again, Giants RB1, 1A, 1B, however you want to kind of look at these splits between him and Devin Singletary. By the end of the day, in the last 3 games he has finished, top 13 PPR finishes each and every time out. So looking good, Dwain, against the Vikings defense that has allowed 125-plus rushing yards in 5 of their last 6 games.
Yeah, my one concern with the Giants is like their overall offense is not that great, and the Vikings have been really good against the pass game, and I think they're going to be expecting the Giants to run because, as you mentioned, that Mike Kafka, we don't know if he's a coward that he just wants to run the ball all the time, or if the Giants are just trying to run out the clock on the season. Either way, lots of rushing attempts between Tyrone Tracy and Devin Singletary, and you talked about it. I mean, even though the role has kind of flip-flopped back and forth, over these 4 games under Kafka, if you look at it, still 15.7 fantasy points per game over that stretch, right? And Tracy is a guy that can find his way into being valuable in any kind of game script. You start trailing, he's going to be the one more likely to be out there on receiving downs. If you get down, they don't eliminate his role. It just turns into more of a 50-50 split between him and Singletary if they're playing from ahead. So I think he's pretty well like I'm not as high as you guys are on him. I have him as a borderline running back too. But because he's so diverse, like I don't see him being completely eliminated. Like I've got an 18.1 Xfinity best ceiling on him, but he has a nice floor just because like he really can do a little bit of everything. The biggest thing that's hurt him, honestly, has been Singletary getting the work inside the 5-yard line. But Tracy, he did manage just to come up with scores last week. Obviously did some nice work in the receiving game with Jackson Dart downfield.
Someone also not low-end RB2 discussion, at least for Dwain and I, we are the highest on. Mr. Kenneth Gainwell set up for a potential shootout against the Detroit Lions. We are talking about the highest game total of the week between Steelers and Lions, only one north of 50 in this one. So, Dwain, on this season, only Jahmyr Gibbs is actually averaging more PPR points per touch than Kenneth Gainwell. And accordingly, me, and our one true superstar fantasy live, Kendall Valenzuela, the only ones with Kenneth Gainwell ranked ahead of Jaylen Warren. And frankly, I feel fine with that.
Yeah, I do too at this point. And the big thing is this, it's the high leverage situation. So where the fantasy points really come from, he's very engaged in the offense. Like he's leading the way with 100% of the 2-minute offense over the last 4 games. And he's getting 53% of the work in short yardage situations. So that was a role that used to just pretty much go to Jaylen Warren. We saw a little bit of Gainwell inside the 5 early in the year. It kind of went away. I will say, it's Arthur Smith. So we don't know. Like he does this thing where we feel like we have a trend on his players. And after 4 weeks, like he breaks the trend. And I do wonder if that's it. Like he just decides, okay, we've been doing this. Now we got to go do this other thing. So there's always some risk with Arthur Smith. But to your point, like Gainwell's just playing so good, Ian. Like as a receiver out of the backfield, one of the top 5 guys in the league. As a rusher, he's one of the top 5 guys if you look at a lot of the efficiency stuff. So yeah, with Gainwell and a potential shootout here with the Lions, it would make sense. Like this would be a Kenneth Gainwell type of game based on the way we see the game playing out. So yeah, it's a scenario for me where at first, like when I ran my first ranks, I had him just outside the top 24. And the more I looked at it, I was like, no, he's got to be inside the top 24 this week. So I think low end running back too.
Especially in full PPR too, man. At least 6 receptions in 4 of the last 5 games. I mean, Rodgers is feeding this dude pretty much as soon as he gets the snaps. It seems like at least a handful of times per game. Takes us though to, Dwain, the main event. Raiders RB Ashton Genty going up against a ferocious Texans defense that has the Raiders team implied total, guys, at 11.75 points. That's easily last in the NFL, but it's also an entirely different tier than even some of the other worst offenses. The Browns are at 15.5. The Titans and Jets are at least in the 17. So we're talking about an expectation, Dwain, that the Raiders are going to be almost 4 points worse than the Cleveland Browns this weekend. So Ashton Jeanty, man, again, I know it pains you guys, all right? I have a dynasty league where I benched Jeanty for Rico Dowdle, and I literally had to look at myself and be like, I used a second-round pick on Ashton Jeanty. I'm not going to start him in the playoffs. But, Dwain, I don't think we can let that sort of reasoning get in our mind. It comes down to who's going to score the most points in Week 16, and just based on what we've seen and based on what we're expecting, man, Ashton Jeanty's an RB3 in this spot.
Yeah, man, this is one of the lowest team totals you'll ever see. And I think Friedman's NFL betting game model actually has it lower. I think it's at 9 points or 9.5 points in Friedman's model, which, guys, takes into account travel, the field surface. Friedman is like complete nerded out on this stuff, like, and he's researched it for the last 5 years, and the model's done really well. So whenever it's even lower than 11.5 points, like, I don't even know how that's possible, but it is happening. And the other thing going on with Jeanty, Ian, that it's kind of low key. We haven't talked about it a lot just because Jeanty hasn't been super fantasy relevant here, down the stretch, but he's handling less of the passing down work over the last couple of games. So he's still leading the team in rushing workload. He's still going to get his touches, guys. But any way that you can be hurt for a player that plays on such a bad offense like the Raiders, like, we just hate to see that. So I do think that Jeanty falls into running back 3 territory. And the one other final thing is the Texans early in the year were really good against the passing game, still are, but they've improved a lot against the run over the last 6 weeks. So they now rank as the 7th hardest matchup for opposing running backs, with a minus 3.0 fantasy boost to opposing RB units per game. So you just add it all up, and yeah, it's just, you're better off trying to steer clear of Jeanty. I'm with you. I'm going to start Gainwell over him. I'm going to start Rico Dowdle over him. All these names that we've been talking about, I think, are in the lineup over Jeanty.
And the other thing is, man, they've been an outlier offense in how few plays they're running because of how bad they are. They've only run 45 plays per game over the past 3 weeks. That's 7 fewer plays than the next worst offense, guys. So as much as, again, you look at those RB1 caliber, like rush attempt shares and target shares and stuff, but when that overall pie that we're talking about is as small as it is with the Raiders, again, just absolutely atrocious spot. So because of all that, Dwain, I'm sure Jeanty will have his best game in a month, but unfortunately will be on my fantasy bench more times than not. That said, guys, if you are hopefully not in a situation, but maybe you are needing to get a little sick out there, where we got the man for you, Dwain. Sicko starts season. Who you got at running back in Week 16?
We're going to go with Michael Carter, Ian. He is rostered in 27% of leagues, at least when I wrote this yesterday. He's in 6% of starting lineups right now. But today, when I put out the start sit question, he was the most asked about player. I think I got 12 responses with Michael Carter in it, and I still haven't finished reading all the threads. So appreciate all you guys giving us feedback for the show tomorrow. But with Bam Knight, injured, we saw Carter dominate the backfield last week. Ian, 79% of the snaps, 70% of the rushing attempts, and 11% target share, 72% route participation rate. He had 11 targets in that game. So, I mean, obviously it was a game that got off the wheels, but it feels like every Cardinals game, just goes off the wheels. So it's always in play here. Here's the thing. I will say one little hedge, and I know you're hedging on this a little bit too in your ranking, and I think we're actually lower than the rest of the rankers on Michael Carter. We have him more as like a high-end running back 3. A lot of our other rankers do have him inside the top 24, which I think is also fair, but it's Amari DiMercato. Just remember, guys, he was coming back from a high ankle sprain the first game last year, and this is a player that we saw look pretty good earlier in the year. I will say this. We have seen Michael Carter handle a full workload across all downs in multiple offenses now. We also saw it before with the Jets. We saw it last year with the Cardinals at the end of the year. We're now seeing it again now. We've never seen that kind of role from DiMercato, but it's just enough that I can't get so crazy bullish, Ian, where I'm just pushing, Michael Carter too high in the ranks. I may end up with him in the top 24, but right now I'll just say borderline running back 2. But that's still really good for a guy you guys can get off of your waiver wire if you're really hurting at the position. He has an Xfinity best ceiling of 20.8. His median projection is 12.5. That's better than Ashton Jeanty. And he's got a floor of 9.1. So again, high-end running back 3. If you want to call him a borderline running back 2, I'm not going to argue with that. Just be aware that we could see a little bit more Amari DiMercato this week.
Good to hear that he is, again, projected for a higher ceiling than Jeanty, because I do have him ranked ahead of Jeanty as well. So DiMercato is not listed on the injury report, which I know I talked about earlier in the week, but you also then look at his game logs, and they haven't even given DiMercato more than 7 touches in all but 1 game this season. So I am expecting Carter to lead, and even if it's not going to be that 80-20 split that we saw last week, Dwain, still seems like it will be a pretty comfortable, margin there. So good stuff on Carter. Now for the Hartitz heater, something we haven't discussed, but I do think could be set up well, guys. Aaron Jones, give me 100 100 plus total yards and a long anticipated trip back to the end zone against the New York Football Giants. Again, 78 unfortunate touches in a row without a touchdown for Jones, but still think he's looked like he has burst back since returning from that unfortunate hamstring injury. And again, this matchup truly on paper is the best for running backs outside of the Cincinnati Bengals, of course. So again, Vikings offense under JJ McCarthy, once they've kind of gotten past that just hellacious schedule stretch, has been playing better. So I'm a little bit more confident in some scoring opportunities being on the table. Accordingly, he's my RB24 and Dwain's RB25 on the week. So again, I think similar kind of touches, similar matchup to guys like, Gainwell, Breece Hall, and Dowdle. I probably would lean towards those dudes, but give me Aaron Jones ahead of Amari Hampton, Tony Pollard, Michael Carter, Genty, and Jalen Warren. So good stuff there. But now let's get to some of you guys hanging out with us. It's time for our Xfinity Start Sit. All right, Dwain, we got one right off the bat from our guy, Nozizaki. Cool. Is it getting too cute to bench Kyren Williams for Michael Carter? Yes.
Yes. Getting too cute. Don't do that.
From JP, though, needs a flex in half PPR. Wan'Dale, Breece, or Blake Corum. I still think at that point in half, look, when it's close in half PPR, I tend to go with the running back that's looking at pretty big volume. So I would go with Breece Hall here.
Yeah, Breece Hall comes out ahead in the projections as well. And I also have him ranked ahead of Wan'Dale. It is a close enough call that I would say you can go with your gut on it, but Minnesota's been really tough against the pass guys. So that's the other thing Wan'Dale's going to have to deal with. Has been lining up more on the outside. So they'll move him inside to try to protect him from this stuff. But the Vikings pass defense has been no joke, man. They've been really good over the last 4 to 5 games. So I lean to Breece Hall. I will say it's close enough if you really want to go Wan'Dale, like they're in a group of players together.
I agree with you there, but give me Breece just by a hair. From our guy, Danny, start Walker or Zach Charbonnet. Does seem like it is a K9 out there, Dwain, but, answer might just be no, like it's been the last few weeks as well.
Yeah, if you could go no, it would be better. But if I have to choose between the two guys, I am going Walker.
Also, Danny, we are consensus Mike Evans over Emeka Ibuka. We do have a QB question from Eric, though, Dwain. Justin Herbert or Trevor Lawrence? Matchups there for Herbert, but I just think, man, the way that T-Law has been on the heater, give me Lawrence despite the tougher matchup.
Oh, man, it's the Broncos. It's really one of the toughest matchups. We have seen teams get to them. We saw Mariota really light them up. So it's not like they're like impenetrable. I lean Herbert. I've got Herbert ahead. I'm at 15 on Herbert. Freeman's at 11 on Herbert against the Cowboys. You do worry, though. And think about it this way. If we had Justin Herbert versus the Cowboys, Ian, 6 weeks ago, he would be in our top 4. He'll be in our top 4. So that tells you how worried we are about the Chargers offensive line and just the overall way their offense is operating, running the ball way more like over these last 6 games versus the pass happy approach they had early in the year. I do lean Herbert, though. I have him 2 above, but again, really close because I've got Trevor Lawrence sitting there at 17. So Ian's going to ride Lawrence and the heater he's been on. I'm going to say that some of Lawrence's you've mentioned this before too, Ian, he's had some really good matchups over the last 4 games. It gets tougher this week. So I'm going to stick with Herbert, but it's only 2 spots ahead. Good luck.
This is one to keep an eye on the injury report. Quentin Williams obviously going through concussion protocol for the Cowboys. And also Quentin Johnson did return to practice with that groin injury. So could be the difference maker there. Last one from our guy, Matt, in full PPR, Darren Waller, Colson Loveland, or Jawan Johnson. We're about to get into some wide receiver injuries. But I think given the fact that Rome Odunze and Luther Burden are out, that's enough for me to prefer Colson Loveland, Dwain, especially with the quarterback switch in Miami.
Yep. I've got Loveland at 11. I've got Waller at 12. And then who was the third? Jawan Johnson, I've got at 16. So I think this one is Colston Loveland, man. It does sound like Cole Kmet's going to play. So we're probably not going to get like that. We might have had like an 80% route participation rate. Then we would have moved Loveland even up further. But to your point, not going to have Odunze, not going to have Burden. I'll be honest, man. I think Colston Loveland, with those 2 guys out, he's the best receiving option out there for the Bears this weekend.
I mean, I'm looking at the ranks, dude. I think I finished up with them a little bit behind Colby Parkinson, but if you want to disagree with that, I really couldn't, call you crazy. So honestly, I think it'd be McBride, Kittle, Pitts, Bowers, Fannin. Those are the only guys I would definitively start ahead of Loveland at this point.
Agree.
And with that, guys, let's get into the rest of the show. But first, a quick word to those friends over at Xfinity. Guys, if you call yourself a sports fan, you got to have Xfinity. All the games all in one place so you, a scholar, can become the best at watching sports. From the Sports Zone, which features every pro football game and over 1,000 college games, highlights, and alerts all in one place, to their multi-view setting, which allows you to be in up to 4 stadiums at once, to the Xfinity Fan View, which features live scores, odds, and stats all in one place, personalized to you. And oh yeah, did I mention that you can catch all of this in Xfinity Enhanced 4K, a simply stunning viewing experience? All you have to do, guys, is use your voice remote and just say football to find it all. Imagine all your football all in one place. Easy. Xfinity. Imagine that. Learn more at Xfinity.com. Note that restrictions do apply. New residential customers only. Taxes and fees are extra and subject to change. Breaking down some wide receivers now here on the Fantasy Live Show. We got the Thursday night stars, Puka Nacua and Jackson Smith and the Jigba leading things off, followed by Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Nico Collins, and CeeDee Lamb rounding out the top 6. Michael Wilson, wide receiver 7, with Marvin Harrison Jr. out of the lineup. We'll be discussing how that could change here shortly. A.J. Brown, wide receiver 8, Jameson Williams, Mike Evans, Chris Olave, and Rashee Rice rounding out the top 12. Of course, Rice continues to be in the concussion protocol, though, and probably should be considered more so on the doubtful side of questionable. So we'll talk a little more about Worthy potentially booming up the ranks here shortly. But guys, wide receiver 13, George Pickens, followed by Terry McLaurin, Zay Flowers, Juwan Jennings, DK Metcalf, and Lab McConkey. Wide receiver 19 to 24, Devontae Smith, Tedero McMillan, Cortland Sutton, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jacoby Myers, and yes, Justin Jefferson rounding things out. So Dwain, circle of trust, I think you could argue it's just on page 1, but given some of the injuries going on, I do still feel pretty good about Juwan Jennings and DK Metcalf.
Yeah, I think and I think you could even put Ladd in there just because, they're playing the Cowboys, but I wouldn't disagree with I think drawing the line at Juwan Jennings as far as just knowing about the role the player has and feeling good overall about the offense. Like the Steelers, we got the theoretical matchup here against the Lions where they should need to put some more air under the ball. They should need to do that sort of thing. But again, it's Arthur Smith, and we just never know what he's going to do with his game plan. It's just some wild stuff. So while DK definitely carries like top 12 upside this week, he also still carries like wide receiver 4 downside. So I think I would actually draw the line at Juwan Jennings because he just had a great role for the last 4 weeks. And basically, since he's been healthy, he's been good, whereas DK's still been a little bit all over the board.
Obviously a great matchup on Monday Night Football against the Colts defense without their top 2 cornerbacks, and Ricky Pearsall not expecting to sit up for that one. So things really are going nicely for Jennings here down the stretch. Let's get into some injuries though, Dwayne. Guys who are full go in practice now and expecting to play. Tedero McMillan had the DNP on Wednesday, but back to full practice on Thursday, and obviously back into our top 20 without too much of concern there. Also know Pat Bryant back in the picture and practicing in full. So thank you for stopping by, Troy Franklin, but it is back to wide receiver 4 tier for you. Rashad Bateman also should be back in the picture, but you'd have to be pretty freaking desperate out there to be trusting Bateman at this point. More, I think, fantasy relevant, Dwayne, is the status of Marvin Harrison Jr. He has been limited in the Wednesday and Thursday practices to start the week with the heel injury. Again, Michael Wilson was our wide receiver 7 with Marv out of the picture, so you're no doubt starting him if that's the case. How low would you move Wilson, though, if we do see Marv back in the picture? Personally, even with Marv, man, I still think I got to keep Michael inside that top 24. I would start him ahead of Justin Jefferson, even with Marvin Harrison Jr. back in the picture.
Yeah, Ian's looking for a way to get Jefferson out of the top 24, and that would probably be a good way to do it, Ian. But I think you could make an argument. I know we saw the one game when we had, Harrison back, Ian, that wasn't good for Wilson. That was the one game in the last 5 weeks where he hasn't, basically just gone off. I mean, even against the Broncos last week, the guy put up almost 17 fantasy points in a PPR, which is very hard to do for a wide receiver 1. I think you could also make an argument for him as high as like in that Juwan Jennings, Terry McLaurin, Ted McMillan range, mid-range wide receiver 2. So I think the lowest you could take him, honestly, after really looking at the rest of the names and thinking about it, is low-end wide receiver 2, but also wouldn't blame anyone if they still wanted to start him over Tet, if they wanted to start him over Cortland Sutton, over Lab McConkey, Devonta Smith. All those guys, I think, are in the range where you could still start Michael Wilson.
Again, literally the wide receiver 1 in PPR points per game over the past 5 weeks. Is I'm not going to completely let that disappear just because of, 45 minutes with Marv out there, where, again, it wasn't wonderful, but who's to say he wasn't going to continue doing his thing if that game had continued. Also note T. Higgins, guys, still limited with the concussion. We had brief word that he wasn't at practice. He did show up, I guess, at the end of the media, portion of viewing. So we'll see what happens there. he hasn't gotten to a full practice yet. He's been limited the last 2 weeks. We'll see what happens by Friday. So hopefully T's good enough to go. Obviously, he'll be in our starting lineups if so. More potentially problematic, Dwayne, because of the Kyle Pitts impact here is Drake London. He has been limited this week with a knee injury, continues to be called day to day by head coach Raheem Morris. Look, I think if Drake London is in the picture, man, we're going to be ranking him inside the top 15, whether that's wide receiver 10 or wide receiver 15, and feeling good there. But despite this being a wide receiver section, how low would you really be willing to drop Kyle Pitts, Dwayne? Because again, it's one of those situations where just such a huge boom, and he was honestly playing really well before that too. If you want to do Brock Bowers and Harold Fannin over him, that's fine, but I don't know if I can get any lower than about tight end 6 or tight end 7.
Yeah, that's as far as I could go. He's tight end 3 right now, basically in the tier with Trey McBride and George Kittle. And then I think you have a little mini tier of Brock Bowers and Harold Fannin. Then you get into kind of like the rest of the conversation. So I'm with you. I think the lowest you could go would be just bumping him down into the Bowers Fannin tier. So it's a tier below the very top guys, which then would just be McBride and Kittle. But I can't really go lower than that. I mean, Travis Kelce, we're dealing with Gardner Minshew now under center. Dallas Goedert's all over the board. We don't know if he's going to get these little design plays inside the 5. If he doesn't, it's not good. Jake Ferguson has not been good when we've had CeeDee Lamb and Pickens available in the lineup. Dalton Schultz, yeah, we like him. He's been nice, but again, like he's a bit all over the board as well. So I don't think I could start any of those guys over Pitts. So I agree with you. I think the lowest I would go on Pitts, even if we get Drake London back, would be tight end 6.
I recognize, guys, it would be a very Kyle Pitts thing for him to record the best performance of the 21st century at the position, followed by a bust. But dang it, man, yeah. I'm sick in the head for Kyle Pitts. We're going back into the well. Just got to go with it. Also note, Chargers wide receiver Quentin Johnson has been limited back-to-back practices with that groin injury. Trey Harris as well. So again, maybe not ideal for the target upside of Lab McConkey and Keenan Allen. Also wouldn't exactly be going out my way to trust QJ, though still clearly operating at less than 100%. Guys not practicing include Ricky Pearsall with the ankle and knee issues. So again, we have Juwan Jennings in that circle of trust as a top 17 wide receiver accordingly. Christian Watson is questionable for the Packers. He did say on Wednesday, though, that he expects to play. Tavian Wicks also questionable, but again, expecting Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, and Christian Watson to be the top 3. We'll talk more about Reed here in a bit. CeeDee Lamb has not been practicing with an illness, but they did say he was at, meetings in the morning, so expecting him to play. I think the bigger issue here, Dwayne, is Rashee Rice. Now, he has not practiced this week with a concussion. At this point, I am not expecting him to suit up here Sunday against the Titans. So without Rashee Rice, without Tyquan Thornton, who is also not practicing with a concussion, how high can you get Xavier Worthy, man? Because look, Gardner Minshew is not Patrick Mahomes, but he's a capable backup quarterback, and those targets got to go someone other than Travis Kelce.
Yeah, I think borderline wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3. I think the one challenge with it for me, Ian, is we've already seen Xavier Worthy this year without Rashee Rice when we had Patrick Mahomes. Now, he was banged up in those games, and guys, remember, he got knocked out of one of them early, but only 9.7 fantasy points per game. So, I mean, we've kind of already seen this to start the year. Again, that doesn't mean that he can't come on and score like 15, 20 points this weekend. So that's the one thing that would keep me from pushing him too high, is we did get to see this offense really centered, or theoretically would have been centered around him to start the season with a better quarterback than Gardner Minshew, and didn't work out. So I think high-end wide receiver 3, if you want to get him in the very low, if you want to use him as another excuse to bump Justin Jefferson one more spot down the ranks, yeah, I guess you could do it. But I don't even think I could go there. Just because we at least know Jefferson's targets and stuff have been there, but he and McCarthy, like, they just haven't been able to make the connection, but at least like the opportunities have been there.
Even me, Dwayne, I could not quite go that far. So I hear I have Jefferson wide receiver 24. Dwayne has him wide receiver 22. After that, I think I could probably slot him there because we got Jalen Waddle, Quinn Ewers, we got Brian Thomas Jr. I think probably going to catch that pass or tan shadow. A crowded Packers wide receiver room, a crowded Buccaneers wide receiver room. I think wide receiver 25, 26 feels about right for Worthy.
Yeah, I like that. Somewhere in that range.
Otherwise, guys, again, mentioned for the Bears, Roma Dunze and Luther Burden out for Saturday night's matchup against the Packers, foot and ankle injuries, respectfully. DJ Moore, Dwayne, someone who I have moved up to wide receiver 30. You have him a little bit higher at wide receiver 28. I don't think he's a must start necessarily because, again, you kind of mentioned on our Sunday night show, like, yeah, we have seen these 2 touchdown games. And we also saw him before. The last 2 touchdown game have about 21 total yards over the course of 2 weeks of action. So could really see Chicago, again, leaning on the run as they've done throughout most of this year, getting the tight ends involved. And, man, I think DJ Moore is going to be the number one receiver out there, but would I be that shocked if Olamide Zaccheaus actually out-targets him? No, I wouldn't, because that was happening for the first 8 weeks of the season anyway. So DJ Moore, again, upside wide receiver 3, great. I don't think he's a must-start in this spot, though.
Yeah, I mean, and even in these games that we've really not had Rome Odunze, where we've not had Rome Odunze, he's not been on the field. It's not like DJ Moore has just turned into this huge smash play, Ian. Even looking over the last 3 games of the year, I mean, he's got a 14% target share when they've had a pretty banged up room. I mean, it's really been Luther Burden leading the way, even though he doesn't get near as many routes as DJ Moore. So essentially, DJ Moore's been lucky to score the touchdowns. The one thing I'll say is, he is getting more air yards. So they're pushing the ball down the field to more. So that gives him a chance to give you the big play, a chance to get the score. But still, even with all these injuries, if you had told me, coming into this year, we were going to have a stretch of games where none of those players we have named have been available, and it's basically DJ Moore plus Colson Loveland, I would have thought we would have been ranking DJ Moore a lot higher. But the problem is, for the season now, man, his targets per route run sits at 15%. I don't know if Ben Johnson just came in and watched his film from last year and decided this is just not one of my guys. He's not going to be a focal point of the offense. I can't tell you, because DJ Moore technically is still should be in his prime as far as wide receiver age goes. Maybe getting a little bit up there, but still at a point where we would expect a lot more production. So I think it's hard to get him inside the top 24. So I'm with you, keeping him in the wide receiver 3 range. But in a lot of your leagues, that will be startable, for DJ Moore. So it'll be interesting to see some of the questions that come in around him.
Otherwise, guys, Devon Vele out with a shoulder, much to the chagrin of my angry wiener dogs, and also Devontae Adams doubtful with a hamstring injury. So let's get into the riser of the week, Dwayne, and that is Lions wide receiver Jameson Williams. Yes, our one true sun god is always going to be the wide receiver 1 in Detroit, but turns out, Dwayne, that this offense, when operating at peak, just ability, actually can enable multiple top-end wide receivers, which we do expect to continue, and a great home matchup against the Steelers.
Yeah, and I think the big thing, a trend that we can look at and feel pretty decent about, is that in 5 games without Sam Laporta, he's at a 24% target share. So really, this used to be split 3 ways. Well, really 4 ways, because Jahmyr Gibbs is active in the passing game as well. Now that pie is really down to 3. Tesla's playing more. Khalif Raymond, they do their thing, but they just don't get a lot of targets. So JMO can really outshine those guys. Whereas Laporta, when he was on the field, even though he wasn't dominating Ian, they were spreading the ball around a little bit more. So over that span, man, 7.4 targets per game, 92 air yards per game, and 18.1 fantasy points per game with an 82 utilization score. The Lions have the number 1 team implied total, which they pretty much do every week. It's even higher in Friedman's model. It's sitting at a 30, and odds makers have it at 28.3. So Friedman does like the Lions even more than the odds makers. And then if you look at the Steelers, they have been an above average matchup, providing a plus 1.8 fantasy point boost per game to opposing wide receiver units. So yeah, JMO, you guys know the ceilings there. Xfinity best projection 23.3. But the really good thing about Jameson Williams now is we can have a really strong median projection, Ian, which is at 14.8 MPPR. So I think JMO's a top 10 wide receiver this week.
Also in the friendly confines, again, indoors in Detroit. So that would be my only kind of concern here, because Pittsburgh, they're going to be a physical defense. They have gotten a little bit better as the years gone on. They brought in Samuel Jr. and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, good versus good, I do tend to think the offense is going to win out there. So let's talk about Mike Evans, another guy who is a consensus top 10 wide receiver. And why not? He's gotten force-fed the football, never healthy enough to be out there this season. Also, someone set up well against the Panthers defense that he torched last season for 118 yards and a touchdown, and then 97 yards and 2 trips to the end zone in 2 matchups.
Yeah, Evans is looking really good. I think he's a high-end wide receiver 2 this week. If you wanted to rank him in your wide receiver 1 ranks, I don't have a problem, just because it's Mike Evans. We've seen Mike Evans play for a long time. Yeah, he's an older player, but he looked great last week, Ian. Actually, in his 4 healthy games this year, 9.3 targets and 129 air yards per game. I know he didn't necessarily boom in most of those until last week when he gave you the 19.2 fantasy points. But last week, 10 targets, 176 air yards. You mentioned the matchup against the Panthers and what he's done against them in the past, but 20.1 Xfinity best ceiling for Mr. Mike Evans, a 13.1 median projection. So again, high-end wide receiver 2 for me, but couldn't blame anyone that wanted to rank him inside the top 12 this weekend.
Moving right down the ranks, we do got DK Metcalf, your wide receiver 14, my wide receiver 17. Look, the last two games have been great, and Aaron Rodgers has really been playing some good football as well. That said, Dwain, 3 catches, 55 yards, and a touchdown last week. We'll take that. It was just 3 targets, though. And before these last 2 games, we had to watch him go 5 straight games with under 50 scoreless yards. So for me, this is a bit more of a bet on a Lions man-heavy secondary that hasn't been very good, and the Steelers more so being forced to keep their foot on the gas to try to keep up with Detroit. But let's face it, if we're talking Sunday night and we see Metcalf only had 4 or 5 targets, like, we can't be shocked about it.
Yeah, so not very often do we have to talk about a player that we have ranked in our wide receiver 2 range, Ian, and still give them the moniker of boom bust. But you still have to, for the reasons you just talked about with Metcalf, where he talked about Arthur Smith a little bit earlier and the Jekyll and Hyde thing he can do on offense and with his game plan every single week. Theoretically, like when you look at Metcalf, he's playing pretty well this year. He's got a 23% target share, 43% of the air yards. There are other offenses, like, for example, if he just played in the Lions and he swapped places with Jameson Williams, we'd probably be talking about DK Metcalf as a top 10 wide receiver this week in this matchup, like we're talking about with Jamo. But he doesn't. He plays for the Steelers, Ian, who they like to lean into the run, minus 1% drop back rate over expected. So it's not like crazy, but man, they run such a slow offense as well. They're 29th in neutral play clock remaining at the snap of the ball. And that's a trend you can slice it and dice it, guys, over any 4-game span. They're at the bottom 5 every single time. So this is something that they're true to. And it's an Aaron Rodgers thing. He's that old school, likes to come up at the line, do all the checks, takes the play clock way down. But when you run the plays down and you have a team that's also willing to run the ball and you also have a game plan that changes week to week, that's where all the boom bust comes in for DK Metcalf. But because of the matchup against the Lions and your point that they may need to air it out some more, and it is the second best matchup for fantasy wide receivers, a 5.6 points per game boost to opposing wide receiver room. So I think Metcalf ends up with a touchdown this week, Ian. But again, like, can he really boom to be that high-end wide receiver 1? We know it's possible, but he could still be a wide receiver 4, which is really weird to say about somebody that in our consensus ranks is inside the top 18 wide receivers.
And that is why, again, we just couldn't quite include him in that circle of trust. And we were kind of going through that wide receiver 2 tier of things before. So let's talk about someone who is not in our top 24, but I still think does have a chance of booming this week. And that is Jayden Reed, set up well against the Bears secondary that has gotten a little bit healthier, I think, as the year has gone on. The defense as a whole has been playing better. They've been opportunistic all season long, but starting to be a little bit more sound when the weather's getting colder. That said, Dwayne, second worst defense in the NFL behind only the 49ers in PPR points per game, allowed to slot wide receivers. So Jayden Reed, I know we're not ever going to get the 90% route rate we're hoping for, but maybe with a banged up Josh Jacobs, we get a few extra rush attempts. And again, the matchup is one that at peak powers, Jayden Reed should be able to smash.
Yeah, and overall, the Bears have given the number 3 boost to opposing wide receiver rooms. So I don't know. When I look at Reed and Christian Watson's coming back from the injuries, guys, he is trending towards playing. We've had Watson, limited in 2 practices now this week, so I think he's trending in the right direction. But really, like, since they've lost Tucker Kraft, they just don't have a playmaker, Ian, in the intermediate range of the field and underneath. And that's really the role that Jayden Reed fills. So even though he's in this part-time role, I do think that pushes him up in the wide receiver 3 territory. I think mid-range wide receiver 3 is the best way to think about him. He's not a player you have to have in your lineup, but this is a nice spot for him. So he projects for 10.6 fantasy points. So again, not near some of the names that we were just talking about. That's 4 points below what we talked about with Jamo. It's well below what we talked about with Metcalf, but he still has upside. He's also active in the run game. He's got 2 rushing attempts over the last 2 games since returning. He's just one of these players that you can also see, even though the role is limited, they can just come up with a game plan that's designed for him and just really feature him whenever he's out there, because it's such a hard position to cover if you're running a good scheme, especially when you have to respect the run game like you do with the Packers. So I would say mid-range wide receiver 3. If Watson is playing, that hurts him just a little bit, but I'm honestly not going to move him that much in the ranks, even if we know that Watson's playing.
I am with you there. Both guys kind of in that same wide receiver 26 to wide receiver 30 range, in my humble opinion. Dwayne, last one, Dolphins wide receiver Jalen Waddle, who, yes, we're going from Tua to Quinn Ewers, which you would think would be a downgrade, but I don't know, man. Tua's kind of playing like one of the worst quarterbacks in football for the better part of, honestly, this season, and particularly the last few months. So this one is going to be in Miami, so we don't have to worry about too bad of weather or anything like that. Now, the Bengals, in large part, thanks to the excellence of DJ Turner, have been actually quite good against wide receivers this year. It's been more so running backs and tight ends who have really killed them. But I look at Waddle as our wide receiver 25, and I feel like that's about right, okay? Give me Justin Jefferson, Tyrell McMillan, Cortland Sutton, some of those guys we talked about. But if you're Mike McDaniel, Dwayne, I think you want to show the the world just what you can do when you are with a quarterback not named Tua. So I do think we got to consider that storyline as well.
Yeah, I agree. But I think like if you had to tell me like what's the thing that's more likely to happen, a complete bomb by Quinn Ewers or him blowing up, I think it's a complete bomb. And so that's why we've had to move Waddle down. It could, to your point, work out fine. There's not going to be a lot of NFL film on Quinn Ewers. Obviously, the coaching staff for the Dolphins, they're going to know. They've been looking at him all year. They know what his comfort zone is. They know the things he can do well. He should know the offense. And Waddle is still a clear-cut number one option, in the offense. Well, as him and Waller, like they're the top two guys, but really Waddle still had the better target share consistently. But he's a guy that would probably be at like wide receiver 18, Ian, if we had Tua. Just because we know like the floor is there. It's the floor concerns with Quinn Ewers. And we've seen it with some of these guys. And Quinn Ewers is a guy that at one point was thought to potentially be, a first round NFL draft pick. Then it turned out, well, maybe he'll go in round 2. And then the college playoffs happened last year and he goes in round 7 of the draft. So really one of these guys that we don't know. I mean, he might be a lot more along the lines of like Brady Cook. And that's why we've had to move Waddle down to really being more of a borderline wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3 versus that typical ranking that we give him, which is more as a mid-range wide receiver 2.
I will be really curious to see what Ewers can do because, again, I know, guys, I've watched the film and I've watched plenty of Texas games. Like when you watch Worthy and, A.D. Mitchell and some of these other guys coming out, like it has been rough. But I'm also old enough to remember like Quinn Ewers walking into Tuscaloosa and just throwing, dime touchdowns there against Bama back when Bama really still was Bama. And they're still good. Don't kill me, SEC fans. But, Ewers was the, I think, top-rated 24/7 quarterback recruit ever in their database once upon a time. So would it completely assume that this guy, again, doesn't have a ceiling? We'll see what happens. So come Sunday, hopefully a shootout at least between two pretty bad football teams. But Dwain, enough of that. Let's get into some bowl calls. It is time to go hard or go home, presented by Mike's Hard Lemonade. Are you going to go hard in your leagues and start these guys, or will you go home? This is Go Hard or Go Home, fueled by the bold flavors of Mike's Hard Lemonade, the official drink of those who go hard for their league. Dwain, your wide receiver Sicko start of the week.
Yeah, it's Etienne Mitchell for the Jets. So talk about, a quarterback room where we don't have a lot of confidence. Brady Cook is going to be starting again, but at least showed a little something last week. Honestly, Ian, all this is looking at players that are available, less than 50% over on Yahoo, and Mitchell fits the criteria, and they have to project for volume, which he does both things. So 17% rostered over in Yahoo leagues when I wrote this yesterday, and over 4 games as a starter, Mitchell's averaged 12.8 fantasy points per game. He's got a 77 utilization score, so 27% target share, man, over that stretch. So I can't guarantee you how good these targets are going to be this weekend, guys, but he also has 125 air yards per game, and historically, if you look at guys that have matched that kind of profile, like if he was in a good offense doing that, like we would be talking about him as a wide receiver 1. He's playing in a really crappy offense doing that. So we're talking about him more as a wide receiver 3 this week. So I do think he's a boom bust wide receiver 3 against the Saints this week. Xfinity best ceiling, man, 16.6 fantasy points for somebody you're getting off the waiver wire. Like that is not bad at all. A median projection of 10.4. Just realize, guys, the offense is bad, and that's where the real dud potential comes in. And we've actually seen a few of those. Just got to look 2 games back to Brady Cook's first start when Etienne Mitchell gave us 3.4 points versus the 17.4 that he gave you last week. So really, it's a range of those 2 things. I can't tell you which one it's going to be, but what I can say is he's going to get his opportunities. And that's the main thing that we're focusing on here with Etienne Mitchell. Only a year or 2 player, and he's got that ability to hit the big play, Ian. So that's the other nice thing. He might only come down with 2 of those catches, but one of them could be 40 yards for a touchdown, and that'll be enough to make your day.
Dwain's wide receiver 32, my wide receiver 35. So yes, and Tom Brady Cook, we trust here. For my Hartitz heater, I am going to go back to Xavier Worthy. Give me him catching a long touchdown and turning in a legit wide receiver 1 performance against a Titans defense that really is good against the run, guys. When you look at when they've actually come back from their week 10 bye, we're talking about the 6th best defense in terms of EPA allowed per rush, but they're the 7th worst defense in the EPA allowed per dropback. All right, L'Jarius Sneed's been on the IR forever at this point. They gave up 364 yards and 3 touchdowns in bad weather to Shedeur Sanders. I think I probably should have just said that from the beginning, Dwayne. Who cares about the rest of it? Okay. So I know it's not Patrick Mahomes, but come on, Gardner Minshew's been around the block. I do think that he is probably going to try to take advantage of this opportunity, put some good film out there, and just try to do his thing. So Worthy, again, clear-cut number one wide receiver. Yes, Travis Kelce will get his, but the Titans are this kind of perfect, bad, just pass funnel defense we want to target because they are stout enough against, let's face it, a non-existent Chiefs run game to, I think, actually lead the Minshew throwing the ball quite a bit. So give me Worthy going off again. Very close. I would go with Justin Jefferson over Worthy, but versus Waddle, versus BTJ, versus the Packers, versus the Buccaneers, give me Worthy doing big things in this spot. And guys, that does wrap up this week's Go Hard or Go Home, brought to you by Mike's Hard Lemonade, because playing it safe is how you end up watching the playoffs from the couch. Let's get into quarterbacks here on the Fantasy Live Show. We got our consensus top 12 on the board, headlined by Mr. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Drake May, and then, yes, Jacoby Brissett QB4 in the year 2025. What a time to be alive. Lamar Jackson QB5, Jared Goff QB6, QB7 through 12, Joe Burrow, Brock Purdy playing on Monday night against, again, that injury-ravaged Colts defense, Dak Prescott QB9, Matthew Stafford QB10 ahead of Thursday Night Football, Jackson Dart and Bo Nix rounding out the top 12. In terms of injuries, Dwayne, not a ton that are necessarily going to be surprising us here. Of course, we do have Jaden Daniels out with the elbow injury for the season. It will be Marcus Mariota. He's coming in more so as about a QB20 for us. We do have, again, Tom Brady Cook under center with Tyrod Taylor and Justin Fields out. Lamar Jackson did return to a full practice on Thursday, had to miss his Wednesday practice, of course. This time it was because of an illness, but Lamar is good to go. Geno Smith will be back for the Raiders, and also Anthony Richardson did have his practice window opened. That said, Shane Steichen did say that he still has some vision limitations. It's not truly 100% right now. So again, nothing exactly hanging in the balance that should be impacting our decisions as we get into the weekend. So with that, Dwayne, let's talk about just the wild reality that is Jacoby Brissett as the QB4. So he is your QB4, my QB5. Our only difference is Lamar Jackson. But honestly, man, I see where you're coming from. So it's just one of these things where it's death, taxes, and Jacoby Brissett putting up fantasy points. And I don't exactly see this Falcons defense being the one to stop him.
Yeah, and it's just one of these things where we've got such a big sample now on Brissett, and he's gotten over the hurdle of playing two tough defenses in the last 2 weeks with the Rams and Texans, delivering 19 and 20.6 fantasy points in those two games. So that was really the last thing. His worst game since becoming the starter in week 6, Ian, is 17.4 fantasy points. He's averaged 20.7, which is the QB4 since he has been the starter. So it's just, we've got a big enough sample now that I just feel like we have to lean into it with Jacoby Brissett. It's weird because he's never done this in his career. Like, he had a nice year that year with Cleveland, but it wasn't like we were talking about him as a potential top 6 quarterback. But like the Cardinals with Brissett under center, they just want to throw the ball, man. A 6% drop back rate over expected. That leads the NFL since he took over as the starter for the Cardinals. And over the last 5 games, they've even been more pass happy, Ian. And it's not just due to the trailing game scripts. It's a 10% drop back rate over expected over that period, leading to a 78% drop back rate, guys. Like, so almost 80% of the plays are pass plays for the Cardinals. So just lots of volume here. And we've basically seen him in every kind of game script as well. So Brissett has just really shown that he can kind of like make his way through all the potential issues that would derail guys. So yeah, I have him in the top 4 this week. I would start him over Lamar Jackson. It feels weird to say that, but Lamar, if we look at the last 5 games, we've gotten one good game. Jacoby Brissett's actually put up fantasy points in every single one of those. I will say this, Lamar's got a great ceiling, guys. He's one of the few quarterbacks in fantasy up there with Josh Allen that could score 40 points. So if you're absolutely needing upside, you're in a matchup where you're just like, oh my God, like how am I going to win this game? I would go with Lamar. It's still close enough that you can make that call. But if it's a close game and it's a toss-up, man, I'm just leaning into Jacoby. Projects for 18.7 fantasy points, a 24-point Xfinity best ceiling. So yeah, my QB4 playing against the Falcons defense, which early in the year, Ian, they were kind of a problem for opposing quarterbacks, but really they've tailed off over these last 6 to 7 games. Folks seem to have figured out how to attack that secondary for the Falcons. So I do like Jacoby Brissett. It feels so weird saying this, and I feel like we've been wanting to do this for like 3 or 4 weeks. We're like, well, we'll see what he does against the Rams and against the Broncos. Well, he got through those 2 games, man, and still put up respectable numbers.
And now you take Bam Knight out of the picture. Like, who's to say he's not going to throw the ball 50 times out there here on Sunday? So Jacoby Brissett, again, top 5 QB. And I do agree with your kind of rationale between the floor versus ceiling plays versus someone like Lamar Jackson. And I do think that line of reasoning also applies to Jared Goff, your QB5, my QB6. And it's just a situation where, no, they haven't been throwing the ball around quite as much as, the Cardinals have. No one really has this season, Dwayne. But ever since they have turned play calling over to Dan Campbell, they've been letting Jared Goff cook.
Yeah, man, 292 passing yards per game under Campbell. I mean, he ranks 9th in fantasy points per game at 18.3. We already talked about their team total. We talked about JMO. They've got the strongest one on the slate. So yeah, I mean, when I look at this matchup for Goff, it's just, it was hard for me to keep him outside of, the top 8. So I've got him as my QB6 or QB5 this week, which is probably one of the higher marks I've had for Goff. But just some of it, guys, also comes down to like where some of the other players or what some of the matchups are, potentially what they've looked like here in recent weeks. And so I just went ahead and gave the nod to Goff. So he projects for 18.6 fantasy points, Xfinity best ceiling of 22.4. I think he's a mid-range QB1. And then we get the Steelers, who've given up the number 6 boost to opposing quarterbacks this year. So I think there's a lot to like about Goff in this game. Like I could see ranking him as low. He's one of these guys, though, I will say. Like, if you ranked him anywhere between QB6 and QB12 this week, like I really wouldn't be able to argue with it. So if you guys are out there and you've got a strong stance on Goff versus someone else that you're considering, fine, just go with your gut on it. I'm just saying, Goff, man, for the year, I mean, he ranks 2nd in passing yards per game. He ranks 2nd in passing touchdowns per game. I mean, he's having a good year. The one caveat with the Lions, Ian, and I know this is what scares people, and it can happen. They're very good on the ground too. So there are these games where it comes out where Goff like throws for 240 yards and no touchdowns, and they just run 4 touchdowns in on the ground. You give 2 to Jahmyr Gibbs, you give 2 over to David Montgomery, and they still end up hitting their team total without even needing to throw the passing touchdowns. That's the one risk with him. But man, in a week where you're just looking at a lot of these matchups and a lot of team totals that aren't as high, I really like Jared Goff.
And I think someone where you can make that same as high as QB4, QB5, as low as QB12 argument for is 49ers QB Brock Purdy, Dwayne. You have him QB8, I have him QB7. For me, the reason why I have him behind Jared Goff and also behind Jacoby Brissett, though, I can see the 49ers beating the Colts by freaking 90 points out there. Yep. And Christian McCaffrey could just be the one to really benefit from everything. Also, no Ricky Pearsall. Man, when we have seen a healthy Pearsall like he and Brock Purdy really have had some nice mind meld chemistry, it would be awesome to finally get a full season of healthy Ricky, hopefully in 2026. But either way, consensus top 8 quarterback, Mr. Brock Purdy.
Yeah, welcome back to the top 12, Brock Purdy. We've seen it for years now. Like, honestly, when Brock Purdy's been healthy and been playing for the 49ers, he scored fantasy points. There's really no way around it. We look at it this year, Ian averaged 18.2 in his 6 starts, boomed for 26.2 last week, showing off a little bit more what we got used to seeing him do on the ground last year and earlier this year before the injury really got him with turf toe. So with Purdy, he's one of these guys, like he's not an elite scrambler, but he can pop up with a 25-yard rushing game at any moment. Like, and that's something Jared Goff is not going to do. So I'm with you. I do have Goff ahead of him. I'm actually the lowest fantasy life ranker. When I first ranked it and I put it up because I hadn't looked and I had him at QB7 and I was like, dang, like I have him at 7. I'm the lowest like out of all of our rankers. And where I have Purdy, I think you're the next lowest at 6. But I've got him projected for 17.2 fantasy points. He's got a 22.4 Xfinity best ceiling. Should be in a lot more lineups than not, guys. So I would definitely advise you to go check out the ranks. You'll be surprised some of the names that Brock Purdy is coming in ahead of this week.
Of course, not all of us are lucky enough to have Purdy or Jacoby. So maybe we got to get a little bit sick, Dwayne. So, all right, I said Dwayne, but maybe we should be calling you Thor here, okay? So who's the sicko star of the week here?
You and I talked about this last week on Talk Data to me, and you told me that I could save myself, Ian, and not really mention it on the air, and then I wouldn't have to worry about, people like just bombing me with the receipts of JJ McCarthy sucking. And I do appreciate you looking out for me because I was worried about calling it. But all we were talking about was like, man, like JJ McCarthy, like if you were really hurting a quarterback, all the matchups are great the rest of the way. And he gets another good matchup this weekend against the Commanders. So, he played the Commanders and the Cowboys over the last 2 games, giving you 20.4, 24.5 points. So now you get to play against the Giants. It's another beatable matchup. And McCarthy's another one of these guys. While he doesn't run maybe as much as we might have thought he was going to do, not that he did it a ton in college, but he's so athletic, we thought he might do it more in the NFL. He's very effective when he does choose his spots to do it, though, Ian. So he's always a risk, or he's always a threat, I would say, to run in a touchdown for a score, or at least just break off one long scramble, right? Where he can get 25, 30 yards on that one carry. So Vikings have a nice team total. Already mentioned the matchup with the Giants, but 18.5 Xfinity best ceiling, median projection of 13.4, guys. So yeah, like wake up, sober up. We're not saying, JJ McCarthy's like a top 15 quarterback or anything, but low end QB2, but he does have low end QB1 upside. And that's what he's shown in these last two games with good matchups. Again, 20.4 and 24.5 fantasy points over the last 2 weeks. And that's without getting Justin Jefferson going. Like if he ever does have a game where he does manage to click with Justin Jefferson, it could be really great for McCarthy.
Did you catch the note, Dwain, on the broadcast where Collinsworth was saying how we talked to Kevin O'Connell about just they actually don't really want their quarterbacks sliding. They almost tell their quarterbacks to dive head first because you can actually see, you can kind of see what's in front of you. And then, like, let's face it, some of the most vicious hits we do see, quarterback slide and the defender has the unnecessary roughness hit. They don't have time to pull off. I found that interesting. At first, I was like, that sounds crazy, but the way he described it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you can protect yourself better going head first, right? As far as like a late defender coming into the play, because that's where the injuries on the slide happen, is the defender that's coming in late, and then they get that head whip to the back that puts them at risk for a concussion. And the other thing you don't lose is the yards, because where you start the slide is where they're going to mark you down. So if you're trying to get the first down marker, obviously makes a little bit more sense to go head first. Yes, I did catch that, and I thought it was very interesting.
So we should, start really analyzing this, Dwain. Just add, an extra 0.3 rushing yards per game for quarterbacks. You refuse
put it in the projection model right after this. Yes.
Now time for the hardest heater, guys. Someone who we do have ranked just a little bit ahead of Mr. Head First Slide and JJ McCarthy. That is Tyler Shuck. I do think he can turn in another top 12 performance here against the Jets, Jets. So with Tyler Shuck, again, no Devon Bailey, which doesn't help, but I do think Chris Olave and Juwan Johnson should be more than enough to take advantage of a Jets defense that just really has been horrible. Look, they just fired the defensive coordinator, so that probably tells you all you need to know. But yes, 82 combined points allowed over these last 2 weeks. Absolute yikes there. So with Shuck, again, had the massive 55 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns against the Buccaneers. Followed up last week, though, with another 8 carries for 32 yards. So this is a guy, again, willing to run, capable of running, and also got a pretty nice arm as well. So he is someone that we are starting ahead of J.J. McCarthy, Bryce Young, Marcus Mariota, Aaron Rodgers, and Kirk Cousins. Honestly, having a very nice little end of the year here. We'll see if we can continue to build that momentum and maybe be the 2026 week 1 starter there for the Saints. Guys, good stuff on quarterbacks. Now let's close things out here on the Fantasy Life Show with a look at tight ends. Top 12 Fantasy Life tight ends on the screen right now. We got Trey McBride, George Kittle, and Kyle Pitts in the top 3. That is right. Kyle Pitts over Brock Bowers with the fantasy season on the line. What could go wrong? Harold Fan and Travis Kelce, tight ends 5 and tight end 6, followed by Jake Ferguson, Colby Parkinson, Dallas Goedert, Dalton Schultz, Darren Waller, and Colston Loveland. Dwayne, I did move Colston Loveland up just behind Colby Parkinson after we got news out of Dunze and Burden are out. Do you concur?
Yeah, I agree. I like Loveland. I got a lot of questions around Loveland, Waller, Parkinson. Like those were the names that I got the most questions on around start set. So I know a lot of you guys are trying to wade through that. But like we talked about earlier in the show, when we talked about the wide receiver injuries, I do think Colston Loveland is very startable this week, low end tight end 1. And I'm starting him over a lot of other names that maybe people wouldn't expect, like Dalton Schultz and some other guys that have been pretty good here in recent weeks. Loveland, the thing with him, Ian, the only thing holding him back, honestly, is the playing time. Like he's in that 65-70% route participation rate. But man, like targets per route run have been there. He does really seem to be blossoming over the second half of the year. And again, I think he's the best receiving option on the Bears this weekend.
Especially, again, with Burden and Odunze obviously out of the picture. So, by the way, for those of you hanging out with us live still, appreciate you. And also update from Kevin Ross saying that nothing too alarming as far as rain and winds go so far in Seattle. He said, we'll keep an eye on pregame warm-up. So current concern level is low to moderate. So relatively good news there. Dwayne, looking at some injuries, again, not too many situations I think we need to be actively worried about. Darren Waller was limited with a knee issue. We saw him take that, what looked to be a really nasty hit in the fourth quarter. Tua did not exactly help him avoid it. Did continue to play, though. And again, again, the fact he's limited, I do think he'll be okay. Cole Kmet is questionable, but he did already say that he's expected to play. Cade Otton has gone from a limited to a full practice. He should be out there. Dalton Kincaid not practicing. We kind of talked about Dawson Knox before, potentially being around that tight end 12, tight end 13 line if Kincaid is going to be sidelined. Also note that Mason Taylor out with a neck injury. I think the big one, Dwayne, but I'll be honest, even if he plays, I'm probably not going to be changing the projection or ranking that much, would be David Njoku. He's still not practicing with that knee injury. With Harold Fant, and again, he's coming in as our tight end 5 because how low can you actually rank someone that could easily breeze past 10 targets? But as we saw last week, when you really are the only pass game option for defenses to worry about, I do think that target total maybe isn't quite as great as it might seem otherwise, particularly against a Bills defense, man, that has been the class of the NFL in shutting down receiving tight ends.
Yeah, they are the hardest matchup, a minus 3.9 fantasy boost. The challenge is like there's just so much volume for Fannin. I mean, since he's taken over this full-time role, and I am projecting this right now, guys, with David Njoku out, but since he's taken over that full-time role in a 4-game span, 2 of those which included David Njoku, he's got a 33% target share and 53 air yards per game. To Ian's point, like maybe not all of those are going to be catchable. We might hope he catches half of those. Maybe 45% will be all that will be able to be completed. Also, some of the pickoffs last week were when targeting Fannin for Shedeur Sanders. But here's the challenge. It's just like whenever you were little, Ian, you're playing backyard football and you're the guy that's the quarterback. Like you know who your best receivers are. And you just throw the ball to them. And that's where we're at with Harold Fannin Jr. I do agree that the matchup is just enough. And overall, look, guys, it's just the state of the Browns offense. Like, that's the other thing holding Harold Fannin down here. If he was playing in a good offense, like he would be in our top 3. But he's playing for the Browns. So that puts him a tier below the top guys. But still so much volume at a position where it's so hard to have any sort of guarantee around volume. He's still one of the guys that are going to give it to us. So yeah, mid-range tight end 1 this week for Harold Fannin Jr. Not quite as high as last week, just due to the matchup against the Bills.
Let's talk about our tight end 3 in those rankings. It is Falcons tight end Kyle Pitts going up against the Cardinals defense that, again, hardly been a group to worry about. The bigger issue here, Dwayne, is if Drake London does actually get up off the bench and wind up playing in this game. As we briefly touched on earlier, though, it is going to be tough to move Pitts down too low. So I would say if Drake London does play, Brock Bowers, I'm definitely moving ahead. Harold Fannin's where it's close. Where would you fall with him?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm moving him below those 2 guys. But again, he's going to be in their tier. So I wouldn't blame anyone if they just wanted to ride with Pitts, man. Even with Drake London back, they could just center everything around Pitts and London. It's not like David Sills has done anything with his opportunities. Darnell Mooney has really had multiple chances, Ian, with other guys banged up and has not been able to get anything going this year. So I think that it could be Pitts and London. And what if London's just not 100% yet? Like, that's another outcome that could happen in this game. Hopefully you would think that the Falcons, if they're going to bring back their star young player, it would be in a game, in a season that's already lost, that it would be a situation where he's fully healthy, but like they could limit what they want to do with Drake London. And there's also just a chance that Cousins and Pitts are vibing so much that London is the guy with a 20% target share and it's still 30% to Pitts. So I'm with you. I wouldn't move him lower than tight end 6, tight end 5, right in that range. And if you guys still want to start him over Bowers and over Harold Fannin do, because those are, let's face it, that's the 2 worst offenses on the slate this weekend. Well, the Jets are right there. Those are your 3 worst offenses. So if you were just like, I'm just going to go with the Falcons, at least they've been moving the football, like, I wouldn't blame you.
I'm with you there. And then on the other side of things, we do have a tight end, Darren Waller, facing the worst defense against tight ends. So again, we do need to give a certain level of credence to that. And we are. That's why Darren Waller is ranked as our tight end 12. But again, going from Tua to Quinn Ewers is not ideal. And we also got to consider, Dwayne, like, as much as the Bengals are, again, a great matchup for opposing tight ends, look what happened last week. They got down early and the Ravens actually didn't even have to throw the ball. So what happened? Mark Andrews and Isaiah likely weren't able to give us anything. And just like some of those concerns we were talking about with the Giants being so run heavy, only the Giants have actually been more run heavy than the Dolphins since week 10. So yes, Darren Waller again deserves to be up there, but I do think that guys like Dalton Schultz, Colston Loveland, Dallas Goedert, and Colby Parkinson deserve the nod because we don't know what we're getting from Miami, and what we are getting could be a heck of a lot of running.
Yeah, and look, Darren Waller, if we had Tua, not because we think Tua's great, but we just know what the floor is with Tua, and he's been able to target Darren Waller and do some nice things, I think Darren Waller would be in our top 8 this week. I think he would slide in ahead of Colby Parkinson, right in that range. But because of the unknown of Ewers, just like we talked about with Waddle, and right now, man, I've got Ewers projected for 182 passing yards. The betting markets have him at 193, which is honestly, it's really surprising, guys. You don't usually see a 7th round pick that you've never seen. And that's not a high projection. You're probably hearing 193. Dear God, like, that's terrible. But still, I was surprised. I originally had Ewers projected at 170, and I saw what the markets were doing. I was like, all right, maybe they know something I don't. So I did bump Ewers up a little bit. I would still be betting the under for the passing totals they have for him. But it's just the chance, Ian, that you get a complete bomb from Ewers. Like, it could be one of these 150, 140-yard passing games. That would really kill Darren Waller. And then the other thing is really the chemistry that he and Tua had once they got down in the green zone. Get inside the 10-yard line, he's basically looking for Darren Waller's. Maybe Quinn Ewers will do the same thing. But we don't know that. I mean, Mike McDaniels is still the guy that's leading the offense. He's probably telling Quinn Ewers when you get inside the 10, like, this is your dude. It's Darren Waller. He's the only guy we have that's like over 6'2". So he is going to be the primary target. But it was enough to move him down despite getting the number one matchup. To your point, the Bengals have given a 8-point per game fantasy boost to opposing tight ends. So that was enough, though, to keep him inside the top 12. I think he's a borderline tight end one.
Ewers did have a nice connection with Gunnar Helm over at Texas, but if you guys were watching those games like I was, I think there was a lot of, oh my gosh, look how wide open that Sark scheme managed to get Gunnar Helm on that play. Not going to see it quite as big of windows here in the NFL. So, and that takes us to the Sicko start, and hopefully people are hanging out with us live, because by the time they're hearing this on Friday, Dwayne, they might already know the outcome. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, it's Colby Parkinson, rostered in 22% of Yahoo leagues. He's only in 10% of starting lineups. He's our consensus tight end 8 across the board. So I think that tells you how much we like him. We don't have Devontae Adams for this game, guys. We've got another, at least this week, without Tyler Higbee. And over the last 2 games, we have seen Colby Parkinson really not take over the tight end room. They're still using a lot of 13 personnel, which is, 1 running back and 3 tight ends guys. So they're mixing in all their guys, but Parkinson has been the guy getting the most utilization. He has a 67% route participation rate over the last 2 weeks and an 18% target share. So in this game, without Adams, you're playing the Seahawks. You're going to need, you're playing a tough defense. They're going to need someone else besides just Puka Nacua to do some things for them. So 15.5 Xfinity best ceiling for Colby Parkinson, median projection of 10 fantasy points in PPR. So yeah, mid-range tight end 1 this weekend for Parkinson, playing in one of the best offenses in the NFL.
And I mean, even with Adams, since week 10, we're talking about Parkinson being the tight end 4 on a per game basis. So really has been doing some awesome things. Hopefully it can keep on going now that the entire fantasy community is hyped about the guy. I'm also going with the tight end. Yeah, right. I'm also going with the tight end for my Hartitz heater, who should be benefiting from their number 2 wide receiver being out. Give me Mike Gesicki going for 6 catches, 80 yards, and a score against those Miami Dolphins. This would also be one of those things where everyone's all hyped about Darren Waller. What about the tight end on the other sideline? But really for the last 2 weeks, guys, Mike Gesicki has not even been playing tight end. He actually has gone 2 straight games without a single snap lined up in line. So really is just their big slot. And we actually did see that emerge as a full-time role last week, 75% route rate after having 2 straight games under 50%. So really does seem like, again, given some of the struggles with Mitch Tinsley, Andre Yoshevach being up and down, is Jamar Chase, and then Mike Gesicki and Joe Burrow's passing pecking order for the time being. So Noah Fant also a bit banged up, but more than anything, I trust Mike Gesicki. I still got him on a few of my remaining best ball teams out there, Dwayne. So trying to speak it into existence here. I do think if we see a situation where T. Higgins is out, I mean, how high could you be moving, obviously, Mike Gesicki up in the ranks, Dwayne? Because, Brenton Strange, Theo Johnson, I feel like there's a higher ceiling here for Gesicki.
Yeah, I think it's a mid-range tight end 2 still, just because he is a bit all over the board. But to your point, he would carry a tight end 1 ceiling and a better passing attack than a lot of these that we're talking about. Like the Bengals passing attack, we like over the Chargers. We like it over the Saints. We like it over the Giants. We like it over the Ravens. So I think you could look at a situation where you move him up ahead of all those. And your note on how they've been using him is really the big part. So if we don't have T. Higgins, which is the way I have it projected right now, guys, I would move up Gesicki a little bit in my ranks in the projections right now. We don't have T. Higgins playing. So we'll keep an eye on that. As Ian's point earlier, it's been limited 2 weeks, but they've been kicking Yoshevach to the outside is what they did last week. And to your point, it was really Mike Gesicki playing that slot role, which is really nice when you play with Joe Burrow.
Guys, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Fantasy Live Show. Make sure you check out Dwayne, though, tomorrow on Talk Data to Me. Again, going through a lot of those even more start-sit questions and generally just talking data to you. Who doesn't love that? Otherwise, make sure you check out our ranks over at fantasylife.com. And other than that, good freaking luck, guys. Set those lineups, and we'll see you back in week 17 to get you ready for those fantasy championships. So for Dwayne, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Live Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.